I've always been afraid of the dark. Not in the way that children are afraid of monsters under the bed, but in a way that's deeper. Something about darkness always felt wrong to me, as if it hid more than it revealed. It's not the absence of light that scares me, it's what lurks in that absence. The shadows, the spaces between. I know how that sounds. Paranoid, delusional even, but I can't shake the feeling. It's been there for years, gnawing at the back of my mind like a splinter, slowly driving me mad. When I was younger, I dismissed it as an overactive imagination, the kind of thing children grow out of. After all, kids see shadows that look like monsters, and they believe in ghosts hiding in closets. I thought I'd outgrow it, but the unease never left. If anything, it got worse as I grew older. Walking down the street, I'd see shadows flicker in my peripheral vision, darting out of sight just as I turned my head. At first, I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. The usual things people say. Tricks of the light, tired eyes, stress. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that. These shadows weren't like the ones cast by streetlights or passing cars. They weren't the normal, predictable kind of shadows we all live with. No, these were different. They moved independently, like they had minds of their own. And that's when I started to realize, maybe they did. I tried to tell people about it, but you can imagine how that went. They all said the same thing. You're seeing things, they'd say with a laugh. Or, it's just your imagination, relax. But it was hard to relax when I knew what I was seeing. The shadows weren't just moving, they were doing things, and those things were bad. It wasn't until one particularly dark night that I realized just how dangerous they were. I had just finished a late shift at work, exhausted and anxious to get home. The street was unusually empty, save for a few parked cars and the occasional flicker of light from a distant window. The street lights above me buzzed faintly, casting long, wavering shadows across the pavement. I remember the cold air biting my skin, the kind of chill that sinks into your bones and refuses to leave. I shoved my hands into my pockets, hunched my shoulders against the wind, and walked faster. That's when I noticed it. My shadow, if it could even be called mine, but it wasn't alone. There were others, too many others, and none of them belonged to anyone. They were just there, creeping along the ground, slipping between the cracks in the sidewalk, curling around lampposts and trash cans. I could feel them, almost as if they were watching me. Some were barely noticeable, thin wisps of darkness that flickered in and out of view. Others were thick and solid, almost tangible, but they moved with a purpose, and that purpose terrified me. My breath caught in my throat as I stopped in my tracks. A man stood at the crosswalk up ahead, talking on his phone, oblivious to the danger lurking at his feet. I wanted to shout, to warn him, but my voice wouldn't come. I just stood there, frozen in place, watching in horror as one of the shadows, a long, serpentine shape, slid toward him. It reached him faster than I could have anticipated. Thin, dark tendrils snaked up his legs, wrapping around his ankles like living ropes. He didn't notice at first, but then he stumbled, his foot catching the edge of the curb. It wasn't the normal kind of stumble though. It was like something yanked him, pulling his legs out from under him with a sudden, violent force. I watched in slow motion as his body pitched forward, arms flailing, his phone flying from his hand, and then, like a scene from a nightmare, a car rounded the corner at full speed. The driver didn't see him in time. The man hit the pavement, a sickening thud, just as the car barreled into him. The sound of the impact was deafening. Metal on flesh, the screech of tires, the crunch of bones breaking beneath the weight of the vehicle. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My eyes were locked on the scene in front of me, and worse yet, on the shadow that had caused it. It lingered for a moment, coiling around the lifeless body, like a predator savoring its kill. And then, as if it had grown bored, it slipped away, vanishing into the darkness beneath a nearby bench. No one noticed it. No one noticed me, standing there like a statue, numb with fear, People screamed. Some dialed 911. Others gathered around the body, their faces pale and horrified. But no one, not a single person, saw what I had seen. The shadows weren't just following people, they were manipulating them, hurting them, and no one could see it but me. After that night, everything changed. I started seeing them everywhere. In parks, in alleyways, even in brightly lit coffee shops. It didn't matter where I went. The shadows were always there, lurking, waiting, moving just out of sight. And they weren't always subtle. Sometimes, they do little things like knock a cup of coffee out of someone's hand or make someone trip on a crack in the sidewalk. Other times, they were more malicious, more deliberate. I remember one day, I was sitting in the park, trying to calm my nerves. I barely slept the night before. Every creak and groan in my apartment, sounding like a shadow creeping closer. My eyes were heavy, my head pounding, but I couldn't rest. Not when they were still out there, moving in the darkness. I watched a mother pushing her stroller, her toddler, trotting along beside her. Everything seemed normal, peaceful even, but then I saw it. A shadow, slithering around the ground towards them. It was small, barely noticeable at first, but I knew what it was. I knew what it could do. I stood up, ready to run over, ready to scream, but before I could move, it was too late. The shadow reached the mother's foot, wrapping itself around her ankle. She stumbled, just for a second, but it was enough. The coffee cup in her hand flew forward, spilling its scalding contents all over the toddler's arm. The child screamed, the sound piercing the air like a siren. The mother dropped to her knees, frantically trying to soothe her crying child, oblivious to the shadow that had already slipped away into the trees. I wanted to cry out, to shout, to tell her it wasn't her fault, that it was the shadows. But what good would it do? She wouldn't believe me. No one would. How could they? That's when I realized the full extent of the shadows' power. They didn't just hurt people, they were clever about it. They made it look like accidents, like the kind of random, everyday mishaps that happen to everyone. A spilled drink, a misstep, a fender bender, but they were always there, always watching, always causing it. I couldn't take it anymore. The sleepless nights, the constant fear, the helplessness of it all. I stopped going out during the day. The shadows were bad enough in the daylight, but at night, they were unstoppable. Without the light to tether them to a source, they were free to do whatever they wanted. They roamed the city like predators, feeding on the chaos they created, growing bolder with every passing hour. My mind was unraveling, bit by bit, frayed at the edges from too many sleepless nights, too many horrific sights. I stopped sleeping altogether. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing them, without feeling them creeping closer, ready to slip into my room, into my bed. But I didn't know what was real anymore, if I was losing my grip on reality, or if the shadows had always been there, waiting for someone to notice. Then, a few nights ago, I noticed something that should have been obvious all along, but somehow I hadn't seen it. I was walking down the street again, the same time, the same route, the same creeping dread curling in my chest. I glanced at the people passing by, their shadows obediently trailing behind them, flickering beside them under the streetlights. But when I looked down at my feet, I saw nothing, no shadow. I froze, staring down at the empty sidewalk beneath me. There was no dark outline stretching behind me, no faint silhouette under the flickering lights. Nothing. Panic shot through me like ice water, cold and sharp. I turned to look at a woman passing by, her face bathed in the soft glow of a nearby lamppost. She glanced my way, her eyes sliding right past me, like I wasn't even there, like I was invisible. That's when it hit me. I'm not real. I haven't been for a long time. I am one of them. I am a shadow. The realization came like a punch to the gut, doubling me over with the weight of it. All this time, I had been watching these sinister shadows hurt people, cause accidents, manipulate the world around them. What I hadn't realized was that I was no different. I was that shadow. Maybe I had been human once. Maybe I had walked down the street, just like anyone else, unaware of the darkness creeping at my heels. But at some point, I had crossed over, slipped into the void between the world of the living and the realm of the shadows. And now I was one of them. I'm not sure how it happened. Maybe it doesn't matter. All I know is that the fear I've been feeling all these years, the dread that has followed me like a dark cloud, was my own doing, and I am the thing that I've been afraid of all along. This was the first time I've done something like this before. The story was an original idea of mine that I had for a while, and I wasn't sure if I should post it or not, but I decided to give it a shot and hope for the best. And I have a few more original ideas and things like this planned, so I hope you all enjoyed the story and are looking forward to me doing this more often. I'll be doing my best to post once a week on YouTube and Spotify, so let me know if you like this stuff and I'll keep making more of it. But until then, I hope I gave you chills, excitement, or a fright. Thank you for listening, and to all, a good night.